Welcome, today's story is full of drama. Like and subscribe to stay updated. Let's get started.
I'm Ethan Walker, 17 years old, the oldest in my family, but I'm a bit smaller than most of the guys in my junior year of high school. People who meet me for the first time often think I'm a very mature 15-year-old. I'm lean, have bad eyesight just like my dad, standing at about 58 and weighing 140 pounds. Since I can't wear contacts, I've always stuck with glasses. Growing up, that meant I got picked on a lot. After one particularly tough day in grade school, my dad went to talk to the bully's father and ended up fighting him. But when he came home, he told me, "I can't fight all your battles for you." He explained that most of the time, fights aren't formal. They're about bigger bullies trying to prove themselves by picking on someone smaller. He told me I needed to stand up for myself because what they wanted was someone who wouldn't fight back. So he signed me up for self-defense classes and started me on a weightlifting routine. While I may still be on the smaller side, I'm definitely not weak anymore. He also shared some tough lessons from his time in the Air Force, which helped me a lot. He said there might come a time when I'd need to defend myself and the people I care about. I thought, yeah, right. What are the chances of that? But over the years, I got pretty good at fighting, whether it was a fair match or not. I stopped getting picked on as much. People started to realize I wasn't someone they could mess with without consequences. I didn't win every fight, but I did win my share even against bigger guys, and word got around that if you picked a fight with me, you'd probably regret it. I learned to fight dirty when it mattered. But remember, I never start the fights. Never. Kept me out of trouble, but it didn't do much for my social life. I was still small, shy around girls, and didn't go on many dates. I did date a couple of other outcasts throughout my freshman and sophomore years, but neither of them was very experienced with relationships, so all we ever really did was kiss or hug. Now for the tricky part of my story. My sisters, Lena and Natalie. They were twins, golden girls, blessed with charm, beauty, and everything else it took to be high school queens and cheerleaders. Of course, at 16 years old, I was their older brother in years, but they were my tormentors in chief. From the time they became teens, my mother and dad doted on them, of course, as did everyone else in the free world. Mom and dad sort of knew how they treated me but didn't do much to stop them. They never did the really nasty stuff in front of our parents. Mom said they don't really mean to be mean. That was her refusing to see anything bad in her darlings. My dad had an idea of what was going on, but said he wasn't able to do much with them since their mother shielded them from any meaningful discipline. As long as they kept it down and away from home, they had impunity. The one time they did screw up and got caught embarrassing me in front of their friends, they were grounded for 2 months, and that wreaked hell on their busy social lives. It was the one thing they feared, so they stayed within limits. But those limits left a lot of room for them to make my life grim. They couldn't deny that I was their older brother. But at school, they made me seem like a real dork, emphasizing how our kinship was some kind of cosmic screw-up. They badmouthed me in hundreds of ways that came back on me socially. They said I got good grades because I was such a social loser that I had nothing to do but be a greasy grind and study. On date nights, they even hinted that I was a needle. That was the picture of our lives as my junior year limped toward the summer. It wasn't always like that. When we were younger, I was Lena and Natalie's beloved most favorite big brother, and they tagged along with me. They imitated everything I did. It was kind of annoying, always having them hanging around me. I got a lot of ribbing about it from my friends, but I was secretly flattered by their hero worship. One March, when I had just turned 12 and they were still 10, I was in the house getting a drink when I heard screaming. I ran outside, still holding the heavy glass pitcher, and saw the twins backed up against the fence. A Rottweiler that belonged to a man down the street had gotten out of its yard and jumped our white picket fence. It was a pretty nasty beast, always rushing at its fence to lunge at us when we would walk by. I think it was crazy mean. Well, it was stalking the girls. I yelled at the top of my lungs and ran toward the dog. Our mom was down in the basement doing laundry, but I hoped she could hear me. Dad was off somewhere at a meeting. I had no idea what I was going to do, but I was not going to let it hurt my sisters. I knew that. It reacted to me yelling and running toward it by turning to face me as a new threat. It growled and lowered its head. Its ears flattened back along its skull, and its jaws looked huge, filled with wicked teeth. When I got near it, I thought about hitting it with the pitcher, then thought about all the ice-cold lemonade inside. I swung it and threw the liquid at the beast. I got it right in the face, and it backed up, snarling at the shock of the cold liquid. It was like dumping a bucket of ice water on it. I got between the dog and the girls, who I could hear crying behind me. It shook itself to throw off the wet and came at me, jaws open. I hit it on the snout with the heavy glass pitcher as hard as I could swing. That hurt it and it backed off. Then it came at me again and I hit it again, but it managed to get a chomp on my left hand, which was flailing free as I used the pitcher with my right. Damn, that hurt. At least it didn't hang on. But I had deep teeth marks and was starting to bleed. Then the dog yelped and jumped up in the air. I looked up, and there was the next-door neighbor with a BB gun, taking aim and shooting another pellet at the beast. It yelped and ran, jumped our fence, and went running back to its own yard. The man who owned the dog was just arriving when the dog ran past him, so he turned back and got it inside. Then he came over to apologize and offer help. Turned out it wasn't his dog, he was just keeping it for a few months for his brother. He put the dog in a boarding kennel. He paid for my hospital treatments, and yes, I had to take the new rabies shots. They say they weren't as bad as the original ones, but they weren't any picnic either. I hurt like hell for weeks after each one. Back then, the twins were so grateful and proud of their big brother. They kept saying I had saved their lives. My dad said he was proud of me. My mom talked me up to all her friends. I said the neighbor had really driven the dog off with the BB gun. Dad said yes from safely behind a high fence. You were the one who went into the yard and took on the Rottweiler all by yourself to help your sisters. I hope they never forget what a great big brother you are. But it didn't work out like that. After they got into their teens, they grew up fast and became really pretty, popular young women and part of the cool crowd, and I was just their nerdy, embarrassing older brother. They felt they had to put me down to be part of the crowd. Then came the weekend that changed everything. On that late March weekend, Mom and Dad had a chance to get away with some neighbors for a romantic ocean cruise. They had few qualms about leaving us alone. I was considered to be a solid, responsible 17-year-old. My sisters knew that if they went too wild or broke common-sense rules, they would get into serious trouble and be grounded. They knew they could still get away with the verbal abuse as long as they didn't break my rules, which were mostly about curfew, drinking, and stuff. Pretty much what Mom and Dad had already laid down. They went out Friday night. I told them to be careful about where they went and who they were with. They laughed at me and said, "Are you going to sit up and wait for us? Or will you just sit home looking for some tweezers so you can find your little tool and jerk off? See you later, needle." For them, that was close to affectionate discourse. They drove out in the car they shared. They didn't have any dates that I knew of. I didn't either, but that was pretty normal for me. I had called Samantha Reed, but she told me she was in a steady relationship now, so that was that. She was the person I had spent time with before, but now it seemed like someone else was getting her attention. If they were in a steady relationship, it probably meant they were becoming closer. I had always thought she was focused on staying reserved, but it seemed like things had changed for her. I finished up a written report that was due in a week and watched some TV. Then I got tired and went to bed. As a teenager, I had my own ways of unwinding. I was 5 feet 9 inches tall, approximately maybe slightly under average but not far from the norm. I faintly heard the noise of the twins coming because I heard the door slam shut, and I looked at the clock, 45 minutes after curfew. But I was in no mood to be a hard-ass. Then I thought I should at least tell them I heard them, maybe put a little scare into them. I was about to open my door to call out when I heard a crash as the freaking door was broken down. I heard the twins scream and ran out. I saw 3 big guys coming in. I ran to my bedside phone, but there was no dial tone, so I used my cell phone to call 911. I said it was an emergency and gave my name and the address. Home invasion. Assault on underage girls. Weapons. I yelled and put the phone down. I thought that might bring a quick response. I ran into my mom and dad's bedroom and looked for a gun in his closet, but he'd hidden the damn thing someplace to be sure it was safe. So I grabbed Dad's prized Louisville Slugger. He'd hit a winning homer in the Tri-State Championship with it. It wasn't one of those light little aluminum bats they use now, it was solid ash. I started down the stairs and almost ran into a surprised man. Well, I think he was surprised to see me swinging that big old slugger at him. I got him beside the ear with all my strength, although he got an arm up to block it some. Anyway, he fell over and took the railing down with him. I ran downstairs. The two other guys had Lena and Natalie pinned down on the couch and were trying to rip their dresses off. The closest guy had his big tool out, getting ready for action. I gave him some trouble. I swung sideways at him but missed and hit him in the gut. It was a backhanded swing, so I didn't have much aim or force behind it. He went oof and doubled over. I wound up to hit him on the head as he bent forward, but the other guy came around and lunged at me. I managed to land one hit before he shoved me against the wall. I dropped the bat since it was useless without room to swing. I brought my knee up and hit him hard, then I got a couple of shots at his throat, though he partially blocked them. I drove my knee up again, hitting him where it hurt the most. It hurt him like hell, but he was pretty tough because he managed to swing and hit me in the ribs as he staggered back. I moved forward and hit him in both ears with my cupped hands, and he screamed and fell away from me. I figured he'd be out of it for a few seconds, so I headed for the other guy in the room. I couldn't see my bat, so I ran at him and tried to bowl him over. He was too big and strong for that, but I did drive him back a little. I didn't see the girls and thought, thank God, maybe they've gotten out. Then I felt sharp stabbing pains in my back, several times all over, and I dropped to my knees. It was the guy from the stairs, and he had a knife. I fought to not pass out. They crowded around me, all three, kicking and punching at me. I felt my nose break and some searing pain in my jaw. I got kicked between my eyes and fell to the floor. I squirmed around, trying to avoid their kicks, and got one leg up and kicked one of them in the balls. He reeled away. That left too. I rolled over against one of them, grabbed his legs, and tried to topple him. The guy behind me didn't do anything. No kicks or anything. I swung up and tried to land a punch on his balls. I missed them, but I hit something, and I heard him scream. I heard someone yelling, "Police!" The last thing I felt was a heavy knee on my rib cage, a hot pain ripping through my chest as I blacked out. I hoped that the girls hadn't gotten hurt. I came to in the dark. It didn't feel like my bed, and the room was full of low-pitched noises. Chirps, beeps, and gurgles. I coughed something up and heard my mom's voice say, "He's awake, doctor." Then I heard a commotion, and someone was poking around me. There were little touches on my arms and body, and one of them made me scream. "Lena, he has broken ribs," Natalie hissed. "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Ethan. I'm so sorry," Lena said. The little touches were gone, and my body went back to an all-over, body-sized pain. Why was everything so dark? There was an unfamiliar voice. "I'm Dr. Patel, Ethan. Tell me where it hurts." I thought about that. "Almost everywhere," I said. "My feet don't hurt, I don't think. My lower left leg hurts. That's about it." "Why is it so dark?" Nobody would answer that. "I'll give you something for the pain now," the doctor said. He moved away and I could sense waiting. There was a rustle of clothing near my head, and a woman said, "That should kick in a few seconds." I thanked her. "A nurse, I guessed." "Dr. Patel, am I blind? I can't see anything." Before he answered, I heard sobbing. That got me even more scared. What were they crying about? "No, Ethan. You're not blind," he said. "You have some damage to your face around your orbit, that's your eye socket. We've bandaged you up there to make sure you didn't accidentally poke at it. Your vision should be fine. You have a possible fracture or fractures around the orbit, your nose was broken and we've reset that. Your jaw was dislocated, but we put that right while you were unconscious. You have a broken arm and badly broken ribs. We worried that one of those might be in danger of puncturing your lung. We'll want to take a look at that very carefully. You also have multiple knife wounds on your back, buttocks, and thighs, none so deep as to be life-threatening, but they caused you to lose a lot of blood." "Mom, what about Lena and Natalie? Are they okay? Did those scumsuckers hurt them or—" "No. They're not harmed in any way. They're right here. Please watch your language," she added automatically. I heard them then, little worried cries almost like kittens mewing. I felt their small, gentle hands on me through the coverings. Very careful now, barely touching. "Ethan, we're so sorry. It was all our fault. And we've told Mom and Dad that," Natalie said. "They would have assaulted and beaten us, and then ransacked the house. They bragged about all that when they started tearing at our clothes, Lena said. There was a pause. Then, you saved us, Ethan. You saved our virginity, our lives, and you almost lost yours doing it. I don't know what to say. We're so ashamed, Ethan. I can't bear to think of the way we've always treated you. All the nasty things we've said about you to our friends, trying to be cool and insult the nerdy, uncool brother, and you did this for us. I don't understand. Why? Why did you risk your life for us? As mean as we've been to you. The meds the nurse had put in finally began to hit me hard, and I started to fade away. Because I told Mom and Dad I'd take care of you while they were away. And because you're my baby sisters. And because I was almost under but had to finish. It was important to say this, something I hadn't said or even thought in a long time. Because I love you both, no matter what. The next day was a Monday, apparently. I had been out for 2 days, and that first wake-up was Sunday night. Another doctor was on duty, and when he came in, he said he was going to remove the bandages and examine my orbits. Of course, it was a nurse who actually unwrapped me, and she was a very beautiful green-eyed woman, about 30 inches away from me, sitting on the bed. She smiled at me as my eyes moved around and finally wound up staring down at her cleavage, which was considerable and closer than I'd ever seen before. Really impressive cleavage. Her hand was down on the bedclothes, about an inch or so from the instantaneous hard-on that I sprouted. Well, I see that we're feeling much better this morning, she chirped. She didn't move her hand from the medium-sized tent I was making. She could definitely feel it, I knew that. The new doctor moved in from the other side of the bed and checked me out around the eye sockets, flicking a light into and out of my eyes. The nurse leaned back to give him room, but never moved her hand from the tent. Oblivious, the doctor noted that the area was tender, but if there were any fractures, they were very small and would knit themselves back in a few weeks. Then he made some notes on the chart and asked me a few questions about how well I was seeing things. I said, "Not very well, but I need my glasses." He told the nurse to get them for me, and she did so. She put them on very carefully and gently because there were tender spots that they would touch or rest on. Then the doctor moved off and the nurse sat down again and put her hand right back where it had been. I thought it was a good thing that Mom and Dad weren't there, nor my sisters. The doctor had already moved on after quickly noting that I seemed to be seeing everything well with the glasses. I don't know if he noticed how well I was seeing this beautiful nurse's cleavage. Her name tag said she was Miss Johansson. "Ethan, I don't think you know it, but you're the ward celebrity," she said. "Me? What for?" "Oh, don't get all modest on me. It isn't often that we get a genuine hero in here. Usually they're the big brawny cops or firemen. But they get paid to be heroic. We all appreciate their heroics, but that's what anyone expects from guys like that. But you're not the average hero. A skinny, undersized 17-year-old who took on 3 big bruisers intent on violating his family and fought them to a standstill? Get out. Never happens. But here you are." She looked down at where her hand was, all hale and hearty, and with that, she squeezed my erection, which made me jerk upright, which brought me a whole series of stabbing pains, mainly in my ribs, my jaw, my arm, my rear end, my orbits, well, you get the idea, not to mention a new pain in my groin. No, in my tool. "Oh, geez, Ethan. I'm sorry. Please forgive me," she said. "I should have thought about how you'd react. This is so unprofessional." I settled back and let the pain subside. I nodded. I was okay. I got a little carried away there, and I shouldn't have, Ethan. You probably won't believe it, but I'm a very happily married woman who doesn't play around. But I've never been so close to someone who's done what you did. It just made me. She stopped and took a deep breath. "Boy, you have no idea how impressed some women will be. You won't tell on me? Will you?" "Oh no. I'll just take it as a compliment. Lips are sealed, I promise. My, and a gentleman to boot. I wish I were 10 years younger and unattached," she said with a wonderful smile that said she was only half joking. Then she got busy with nursing things. They'd had a catheter in me, and my stiffy had gotten a bunch of pain from it when she had squeezed me. My hard-on had gone down quickly as a reaction to this new variety of pain. Miss Johansson exposed me with no comment and did something that released a little puff of air. Then she removed the catheter very carefully, and also without comment, for which I was grateful. There was some residual ache, but the meds I was getting made that tolerable. I'd put it about 5th or 6th on the list of parts of me that hurt. She wanted me to get up and walk around, and we did, with all my tubes and things hung on a rolling for stand. I went to the bathroom and passed a smidgen of water and had a bowel movement, which felt like I was crapping little pieces of granola. Nurse Johansson told me that was normal. I could only take liquid nourishment until my reset jaw got less painful, and there wasn't much of it that could get through to be crapped. She gave me a bed bath, which produced another hard-on. She pointedly ignored it, although with a sly smile. After the bath, she called in another nurse, and they removed all the bandages, examined the wounds and discoloration, and then rebandaged and redressed the wounds. They annotated my chart. They were both extremely careful when moving me around, but I felt every movement, especially in my ribs and my jaw. Nurse Johansson explained that they had reset my jaw when I was sedated and had also used a tiny tube, sliding it inside me from my navel to view the place where my rib had been threatening to puncture my lung. They somehow nudged it away from harmful contact and were sure that the broken part of the rib would knit properly. But God, did my ribs hurt? They strapped me up with an inflatable kind of giant ace bandage around my rib cage and inflated it. It pulled my chest tight to where I could only take very shallow breaths. They showed me how to breathe deeper using my diaphragm and leaving my ribs less involved. That was better, but I had to think about doing it. Otherwise, the normal breathing reflex would kick in and hurt like hell. That evening, the whole family came to see me, and we exchanged some very gentle hugs. Lena and Natalie got weepy on and off. I asked them about the case against the 3 guys. Dad said that the 3 invaders had a lawyer and were claiming that the twins had invited them to the house and that I had attacked them. They said the twins were scared and lying. They broke down the damn door, I said. Language, Mom said dutifully. Dad said, they claimed that the girls were being flirtatious with them on the porch, slipped inside, and then locked the door while taunting them. They apologized for losing control and breaking it down, but said that those infuriating girls had really upset them. Infuriating girls? I repeated, barely believing it. That was enough for me. I let out a frustrated growl and tried to swing my legs off the bed. I'm going to go find those guys and, I don't know, maybe roll my 4-stand downtown and smack them with a bedpan or something. Of course, tightening up my stomach and sitting up drove my ribs crazy with pain, and I passed out with my legs halfway off the bed. I guess the nurse who was there with my folks helped them get me back in bed and summon the duty doctor. Then, I am told, she went to the nurse's station and told them what had been said and that I had tried to get up to go after those thugs again. Well, I guess she was right. That had been what I was thinking. But, of course, I wasn't really thinking about how stupid that was considering my condition. That was the whole point, was the consensus. I was told later that, to them, it was just like the night of the attack. Come hell or high water, I was going to get those guys. That was an addition to the Ethan Walker legend, as Nurse Johansson called it when she told me about it the next day. Your status as the hero of 7th Floor West continues to grow, she said. By the way, my name is Rose, she added with a smile. Tuesday morning, I was feeling much worse and sore all over. That was a good sign, Nurse Rose said. They had reduced my intravenous pain meds, and the fact that I was only in mild agony meant I was definitely healing. She laughed at the look on my face as I absorbed this. I may not have had a chance at anything going with Nurse Rose. But I still liked her a lot. She obviously liked dealing with me, but she wouldn't let me get away with much self-pity. We had some conversations when she could spare the time, and she knew pretty much all about me, the deal with my sisters before. Even my virginal status. How I was so isolated in school. She didn't try to paint a rosy picture, but she did say that some things would surely change for the better. Your sisters will treat you better. They've just gotten caught up in the in-crowd culture. It hates nerdy guys like you, and they just went along to be popular. Up to now, I have talked to them, Ethan. They are changed. They were shocked by all this. That will affect others. They are popular. Trust me. The invaders will be despised. You don't know how it works at school, Rose, I said. One of them was a football player. The team and the players are like gods at school. The cheerleaders are with them. Those are the people who will determine my treatment. I've seen them band together to protect football players who were jerks. Hell, they'll probably jump me and beat me up the first time they get me alone. Oh, I'm not looking forward to leaving here. But on the good side, if they beat me up bad enough, maybe I'll be back here again and I can see you. I swear she actually blushed. She asked me if I was up for a walk. She unhooked my IVs and took me down the hall. As we walked past the nurse's station, everyone there called out to me like I was their best buddy. Great to see you on your feet, Ethan. Looking strong, kid. Stuff like that. There were 2 orderlies struggling with a bulky gurney down near the elevator lobby. Hey, way to go, Ethan, they said. I'd never seen them before. What is all this, Rose? I asked. I told you you're the hero of the 7th floor west. Really, of the whole hospital. We're all proud of you, Ethan. The way you stood up for your sisters. Like I said, we all love seeing heroes. She took me down to the 3rd floor, saying there were some people there who wanted to meet me. But at the elevator lobby, a big police officer broke away from talking to a couple of nurses as soon as he spotted me. He came over, holding his hand out. He damn near crushed my hand. Ethan, he said, I'm Officer Daniel Wells. I was the first man in the door at your house that night. I saw you on the floor, wrestling with that gorilla before he knee-dropped you. I had the pleasure of taking him down with my baton. Ethan, you did good, man. You did real good. For your sisters. I managed a weak smile. Thanks, Officer Wells. There were 2 other cops there, and they wanted to shake my hand too. What the hell is all this? I thought. Finally, Rose got me away from them and the nurses at the station and walked me toward a children's ward. These are all cancer patients, Ethan, she said. They're in here for a long time. We hope when they stick around it means the treatments are working. When some of them leave, it's to die. They all want to meet you. We told them we had a genuine hero at the hospital. She led me in and introduced me. This is Ethan Walker, the giant killer. Ah, I thought he'd be a lot bigger, one kid said. But most of the kids were great. They wanted me to tell them all about it. I had to think back and also remember that they were kids, after all. So I was trying to sanitize it about the sexual stuff. I got to the part about bopping the first guy and how he broke down the rail. Wow, just like in the movies, one kid said. I was trying to figure out how to describe what happened without going into details about the guy being exposed or the twins' clothing being torn off when someone from behind took over the story. It was Officer Wells, and his account was a somewhat toned-down version of what my sisters had said. I hadn't heard it before. It was pretty much in line with what I had said. I struck one guy with my bat, knocking him down. The other guy came at me, and we struggled until I landed a punch to his head, causing him to yell out and fall. Then I attacked the other guy and drove him back. The girls were clustered against the wall, and Lena saw my dad's bat rolling free and picked it up. Just then, the guy from the hallway came in and started stabbing me with a hunting knife. In the back, then down lower and in my legs. I went on my knees, and then they were all around me, punching and kicking at me. Lena saw me go down, but then I was kicking back and got one guy. He went down. Lena hit him with the bat, and Natalie smashed him in the face with a lamp. I rolled into one of the remaining 2 and punched him. Lena hit the other guy in the back, and he went down. Then the police came running in, just as the guy I was fighting knee-dropped on me. Officer Wells dropped him. Officer Wells said they'd already called for an ambulance but had to call in more. Only one of the invaders was capable of walking, and he had a concussion. So they took us to the hospital, 2 to an ambulance. They arrested the 3 invaders. So Ethan here fought 3 guys, Wells said. Look at me, kids. I'm over 6 feet tall and weigh 220 pounds. They were all 3 about my size or bigger. Now take a look at Ethan here. You think he'd be a match for any of them alone? The kids said, no way. But he was. Wells said. He went after them one after another and fought them to a standstill. He almost got killed, yet he held them off and protected his sisters. That's why he's a hero. No, one little girl said. He's really a superhero. If he fought one guy, he's a hero. He fought 3 big guys to protect his sisters. They agreed on that. They asked me where I got hurt. Rose listed my injuries and pointed to my eyes, nose, jaw, arm, and ribs. I turned around so she could point out the dressings over the knife wounds through my hospital robe. The dressings bulged out enough to confirm, I thought. Then one boy said, "3 guys? That was brave. I don't know if I could ever do that to protect my sister." I said, "Sure you would. You do it because you love her." I happened to look up, and my whole family was sitting quietly in chairs along the wall. Mom was crying. So were Lena and Natalie again. Dad was a little bit red-eyed as well, but I ignored that. I wondered when they had come in and how much they'd heard. Well, I meant it, and I wasn't ashamed to have anyone hear it. I introduced them to the kids. Then I looked at my 3 women and asked, "What's with all the waterworks again?" Mom leaned close and carefully hugged me. She whispered, "Nothing much. Just nice to be reminded that you did it for love." Lena leaned closer and took my hand. "I love you, big brother. Maybe I'll never be able to show you how much the way you did, but I'll never forget it like I did before." Natalie took my other hand and kissed it. She couldn't speak, I guess. I reached out, broken arm and all, and hugged them. Geez, I wished I could hold that moment forever. The only thing that could have made it better was a big family group hug, but no one wanted to hurt me to show they loved me, for which I was truly grateful. I was completely weaned off the hospital painkillers now, and I really didn't want to feel any more pain than usual. But the next day was Wednesday, and I was scheduled to be discharged. X-rays showed my ribs were healing well enough, and my lung was in no danger. Everything else would heal. My jaw was well enough that I actually got to touch some food that needed a little bit of chewing. It wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible either. I had a kind of ceremonial tour in the wheelchair, not forgetting to see my brave little buddies in the children's cancer ward. I couldn't think of myself as a hero when I thought of what they were going through. Then it was home, and home care by my women. As he drove us, Dad told me for the 100th time how proud he was of me. "I guess those self-defense lessons paid off, Ethan," he said. I asked him about the 3 guys and their defense, and he said he was going to go down and see the assistant DA the next morning and try to set things straight. He said he had a little ace in the hole. I said I wanted to go with him. He said he worried that I wasn't up for that kind of strain. I said I could take it, so he reluctantly agreed. Oh my God. The next day was the worst pain I had ever felt since I came to in the hospital. I refused to use the very good meds they prescribed for home. I wanted to be clear-headed when I went with Dad. I needed help just to get dressed. We met with the assistant DA in a conference room. She detailed the charges we'd made against the 3 invaders. One of them was a senior at our high school. I never paid much attention to the sports programs, but he was a defensive tackle. Once again, I was thinking about how the school would react to someone who took down one of their football heroes. The other 2 were former teammates who'd been dropped from the team years before and had dropped out of school and gone to work. Evidently, Ricky was still tight with them. Ricky was the defensive tackle. The ADA also detailed their defense as relayed by their lawyer. It was that same BS as Dad had said. Dad said he wanted to show the ADA something that might be evidence. "Stop," she said. "I may as well get their lawyer down here. He and they have the right to see any evidence that we have." "Sorry, it's the law." My dad said. "Fine. Can you wait to see if I can set up a meeting?" she asked. Dad said, "Sure. We can go have lunch." So we were eating lunch at 10:45 that day. Dad said, "I know you're dying to know what evidence I have, so I'll let you in on a little secret. When you were just a baby, even before we knew your mother was pregnant again, we wanted to go out once in a while. We'd always used Grandma Walker as a sitter, but then she got arthritis really bad and couldn't sit. So we started having teenage babysitters. We'd heard a lot of horror stories about babysitters fooling around, having boys over, drinking and all that, so we invested in a surveillance system, a babysitter cam in modern terms. We could set it up on a timer or to come on when there was noise in the living room. There was only one time when we were displeased at what we saw, but it was relatively minor, and we just had a quiet word with her parents and never used her again. So when we got this cruise thing, we thought it would be a good thing to use the old system to check up on the situation while we were away. It wasn't so much you, but rather some concern that the twins would go to some lengths to kick up their heels and maybe try to get you in trouble. We set it to come on and noise activate after 10 on the first night we were away, figuring Friday night was a big date night. I said, "So did it record the whole thing in the living room?" "Yep," he said. "I thought that over. Dad." The girls were kind of exposed when those scumsuckers tore their clothes. I don't want those bastards and their slimeball lawyer to see my sisters partially undressed. He said, "I'm way ahead of you, Ethan. I used a video editor program to block out anything even slightly exposed. Like that blurry thing you see on reality shows?" "Exactly. They could always insist on seeing the untouched tape if it actually goes to trial, but I don't think it'll do them any good. In either version, they'll look for a plea bargain. That video would put them away for a while. Any plea bargain will be better than what a jury would give them." We killed time until Dad got a cell call to show up at 2:30. We showed up half an hour early. Dad pulled out a USB drive. The ADA was startled. "I don't know if we have a USB player anymore. Everything we get is on cloud storage now," she said. So she had her staffers scurrying around. They finally found a USB port in the training department. The three thugs came in with their lawyer in their jail jumpsuits. They glared at me. I didn't trust them one bit. Their two guards sat down way at the back of the long room. So I looked around for a weapon, just in case, and settled on a heavy cigarette butt stand just behind our side of the table. On the good side, they didn't look that much better than I did, particularly where Lena and I did our bat work. Their lawyer started to object to the tape as evidence, but the ADA shut him up. "As long as you get a copy, the laws of evidence are satisfied. You are free to challenge its authenticity in the trial, but I'm telling you, it's going to be accepted. Now let's see it." Neither their lawyer nor the three dimwits seemed to grasp the gravity of what they were about to see. I don't know what they expected. The tape started, both audio and video, as Lena and Natalie ran into the living room, crying, babbling about how they had no idea those creeps had followed them. Lena said she was calling 911 and picked up the phone. Then she screamed, "There's no dial tone. My God. They're out there." And they cut the phone line. They were scrabbling in their purses for their cell phones when the sound of the door being broken down blasted through the room. Then, two of the defendants rushed in and attacked the girls. The girls tried to get away, and it took the thugs some time to grab them. They struggled with the girls, smacking at their hands, blocking their kicks, and pushing them down on the couch. You could hear them laughing, actually bragging about what they were going to do to them. One of them said outright that they were going to beat them silly and then ransack the house for money. As the screen showed them starting to tear at the twins' dresses, their lawyer stood up and demanded the tape be stopped. He turned to his three clients and started yelling at them for lying to him. One of them, Ricky, must have decided to take advantage of the confusion to get revenge on me. He jumped up and started to come over the table at me. The other two started to go after my dad. The guards were caught flat-footed. Soon after they'd come in, I had already hefted the butt stand standing behind our side of the table. I only had my right arm to work with, but I managed to swing it up, just like Dad's old baseball bat, and clobbered Ricky right in the face with it. I almost screamed from the pain in my ribs, but it was worth it. Dad decked the first one of the two who made it across the table and pushed him back into the other one. Then things got very exciting, with the guards finally wading in and other policemen crowding in to get their shots at the two who were still conscious. They were hit with further assault charges, and their lawyer quickly resigned their case. Then, the assigned public defender sat down with them and told them the facts of life. He went over all the charges and the evidence, including the tape and the surveillance video of the last meeting, where Ricky tried to jump me. He told them he would defend them if they wanted, but that he thought they'd be facing 15 to 20 years if the sentences went consecutively, which they probably would, especially since they had committed violence after bullshitting the court-assigned shrink on how remorseful they were. Well, they were full of something, I thought. A few months later, they pled guilty and each got a 7 to 10-year sentence. But their sentencing happened months after my first day back at school, which was the first Monday after I cold-cocked Ricky with the butt stand. The twins were way too nice to me for the rest of that week and weekend before the big day. I finally got fed up with them falling all over themselves to fetch and carry and do for me. I called a kids' meeting and laid it down for them. I told them I really, truly, absolutely appreciated them trying to be so nice to me, but that it wasn't going to work. They were pampered younger sister princesses, and I was their skinny, dorky older brother. That was what the high school world was used to. It was what their high social rank was pegged to. I wasn't able to express it very well, but what I was saying was that they had to go back to school with that same deal as before to keep their high status, which I knew was important to them. I wouldn't mind them being a little bit nicer to me and maybe repairing some of the damage from their badmouthing, but not at the expense of them losing their position at the top of the social scene. They protested, but very reluctantly finally agreed. However, they would not hear of being that way at home. That was a permanent change. I was their hero, and by golly, they loved the hell out of me. So we compromised. They would call me loser in public and stuff like that, but with a certain air of fondness. They would not call me needle, and they would try to repair certain impressions that they had given of me. Along that line, they would no longer badmouth me. After all, the whole school would probably eventually know that I'd saved their lives and stuff. So how could they treat me like crap anymore? Fair enough. They did say that the whole thing was already all over the school. There were all these rumors that I had done something heroic, although nobody but them knew how and why. They had been going to school since the previous Tuesday. On my back-to-school Monday, they offered to drive me. But I said that wasn't their image. They agreed. So I schlepped myself up Barker Street, then right down Hanover Avenue to the high school. I was still pretty stiff and sore from everything, and I stopped off at Mrs. Hitchens' house to tell her I was okay and take a little rest. She had been one of many people who had called and said they'd heard I had been hurt in a home invasion. She was a grandmotherly kind of woman and lived alone in a big old house. It was close to the school property line, but still quite a hike from the school building itself. Rumor was that she had been a teacher there back maybe when my dad went to school there. Hey, she might have even seen Dad hit that home run. I would stop by when going to and coming from school. I would ask her if she needed anything done, like little repairs or errands. In winter, I would walk over and shovel her walk after doing ours. In summer, I'd hike down to her house, lugging along our old Toro, and mow her lawn. I liked her and was trying to be a good neighbor. I knew she lived alone and didn't have anyone to do that stuff for her. Her house was the only one on the property right by the school. Once, when I was walking home in the rain, she came out and told me that her old dog Toby had gotten out and run off. So I walked around the neighborhood and tried to think where a scared, confused old dog might go. And there he was. I used my belt for a leash and led him home to her. Then we had that big ice storm last winter, and we saw on the county cable channel that school was canceled because the power was out at the school. That made me think of Mrs. Hitchens, who was surely on the same power grid. So I got the keys to my dad's four-wheel drive truck and inched my way over there. She was freezing in that cold old house. I took her and old Toby, wrapped them up in blankets, and brought them over to our house to stay until the power was fixed. So she and I were pretty good friends. And so I stopped by and told her I was starting back. She tried to pump me for details of the invasion, but I was trying to get past that. I told her some guys had broken in and I had called 911, and the police had come and arrested them. She looked at my multicolored face and arm cast and laughed. "Wait until I tell my granddaughter about what you just tried to pull," she said. I played dumb and asked her what she meant. "You got hurt cowering up in your room, right, Ethan?" "Well, I guess I did try to protect my sisters." "I'll just bet you did, Ethan. You're a damned nice young man, but a lousy liar. Go on to school." So I did. It was the weirdest day I'd ever spent. Everyone just kept looking at me when I walked by or sat in the classes. When I passed Lena and Natalie with friends, they stopped talking and watched me. But it wasn't their usual "who is that insect crawling down our hall" look. Nothing at all like that. More interest and curiosity, I thought. I figured things would get back to normal when I passed the locker area known as Football Alley. They might cut me some slack for my broken arm and stuff, but there was no way they would let me go by unscathed if I'd screwed up one of their teammates. And it was obvious that Ricky was no longer with them. But they just ignored me. No glares. No jostling. No nothing. And when Coach Craven came out of his office, he looked at me with some interest. Weird. I caught up with a couple of my loser buddies, at least that's what the school social arbiters would call them. But they were just my friends. They had heard all kinds of wild rumors and wanted to know what had happened. I gave them the same blow-off story as Mrs. Hitchens. I really wanted to downplay all this. The day went by okay in classes and such. I had gotten my assignments while I was out of school and wasn't behind in anything. I usually carried pretty good grades anyway, and that wasn't going to change. I needed good grades to get into college. My dad stressed that a lot. In the classrooms, out in the halls, and in the cafeteria, I kept getting those odd looks, like I had two heads. But nobody hassled me. In fact, a couple of Lena and Natalie's friends were surprisingly nice to me in our classes together. One of them, Marcy, a gorgeous redhead, said something about wishing she had a brother like me. What? This girl had never spoken 3 words to me before, and now she says that? She smiled at me, squeezed my good arm, and sauntered off, her perfect but wiggling at me. Another one of the Golden Girls was having a discussion with a football player who was trying to get her to go on a date. I was walking by as she was brushing him off. I heard him say something like, "Geez, Dodie, what does a guy have to do to get to go out with you?" She looked past him and saw me walking by. I was struggling a little bit, trying to get a book out of my bag. That broken arm made things a lot harder than I had thought. With a perfectly straight face, she said, "I don't know, Ron. Maybe if you were a little bit more like Ethan Walker, I'd feel safer going out with you. He protects his women. He doesn't attack them." It was said pretty loud. I stopped, and I'm sure my face went beet red as she looked at me and smiled. She knew. Or she knew something. Marcy knew something too. Damn. I was gonna have a talk with the twins. I thought we'd agreed to keep it all a secret. That evening, they said that they just couldn't go on as if nothing had happened. That they needed to tell people something to account for their change in attitude toward me. That no matter what I had said about keeping everything the same, they just couldn't go back to being the snotty sisters from before. And if I didn't like it, that was just tough. There were more important things than just being popular. Go Twins. A bit later, they went into my dad's den and closed the door. Oh, I was being excluded, and I didn't like it. The next day, there was an announcement that Period 4 was being turned into a special assembly. They were going to have a visit from a police officer to speak about safety for high schoolers. 4th period was mostly PE classes, school committee meetings, and such. It was just before lunch, so no real classes were ever scheduled then. I met up with some of my friends and we went into the auditorium. As usual, we went up to the balcony, where we could get a better look at the stage and stuff. That way, we could also get out quicker. There were fewer rows of kids heading for the exits up there. All of the student body was required to attend the assembly, and all the names were registered as we went in. That was unusual. First, there were some school announcements. Most of them were old news and we paid little attention. Then the next speaker was Coach Craven. There's something I want to clear up. Most of you were at the game 2 Fridays ago. I'm sure you recall the ridiculous foul that Ricky Mason made that lost us the chance to tie the game, and the subsequent brawl when he charged the official who made the call. After the game, and after a week of thinking about it, I suspended Ricky from the team permanently. I told him last Friday night. We had no game, and I had given it a week's deliberation. It has come to my attention that Ricky and a couple of his low-life friends decided to do something to make it up to Ricky. Something nasty. Something twisted. The rest of that story should be a cautionary tale for all of you young women. Wow. I didn't think Coach even knew the word cautionary, much less what it meant. He turned the floor over to none other than Officer Wells, the designated officer friendly. Damn, I hadn't even recognized him. Officer Daniel Wells looked around at every face in the hall, as if he was searching for someone. He nodded to Lena and Natalie. When his eyes came up to the balcony, and he saw me sitting in the front row, he nodded again. Everyone looked up at me. I did not like the feeling in the pit of my stomach. He picked up the story where Coach had left it. They apparently targeted 2 young women students at school here. They encountered them in a public place and tried to force their attentions on the girls. The 2 girls were smart enough to see they were in possible danger and got themselves out of the club. They drove home to what they thought was safety. There was a big screen TV perched on the front of the stage, and several others on the walls of the auditorium. It was the custom to televise stage shows being presented so that viewers far back could see an image of what was going on. The lights were dimmed, and the officer clicked on a remote. I sank down in my seat. The tape started, both audio and video, as Lena and Natalie ran into the living room, crying, babbling about how they had no idea those creeps had followed them. Lena said she was calling 911 and picked up the phone. Then she screamed, "There's no dial tone. My God. They're out there." And they cut the phone line. They were scrabbling in their purses for their cell phones when the sound of the door being broken down blasted through the room. Then, two large young men rushed in and attacked the girls. Their faces were clear. There were gasps from some of the students as they realized what they were seeing. The two invaders, Ricky, one of them, grabbed the girls after they tried to evade them, slapping at them as they pushed them down on the couch, bragging about what they were going to do to them. I heard exclamations of shock from around me. The rest was selectively blocked, as I had seen before, to spare the twins' modesty. But the audience had seen who the two young women were. Then Officer Wells froze the frame as I made my appearance. Too bad nobody thought to do any modesty blocking for me, because when I came on the scene, I was wearing my customary jockey tidy whities. It was what I was wearing when I went to bed. There were a few derogatory whistles at my skinny body, frozen at the moment that I appeared wielding my dad's baseball bat in my skimpy underwear. Then there was silence as the battle was waged. Somehow, the police technical people had been able to slow the action, so it was like watching a slow-motion replay of a football play. Even I had to wince at the punishment I was giving out and taking. I watched it with everyone else. I hadn't seen it past this point in the ADA's office, because the creep's lawyer had jumped up and yelled to turn it off. It wasn't any different. All the same things happened. Then I thought how stupid it was to think that something would change. When I got stabbed, I heard people gasp. The back of my jockeys was soaked with blood. When I went to my knees, and they were all around me, punching and kicking at me, my face and legs and lower back were all bloody. The twins hit the invaders with the bat and a lamp a couple of times while I was down but still kicking and punching. Then the police came in just as the guy I was fighting knee-dropped on me. As I watched the whole thing, I thought of a number of things. First, I was very glad that Dad had made me take those self-defense lessons, and had given me some of his own. I think I did just about as well as I could expect against three big guys like that. Thank you, Dad. Second, I was lucky to be alive. Thank you, doctors and nurses of Westport City General Emergency. Third, the girls really did themselves proud. I wasn't the only Walker kid who was fighting that night. Fourth, I really wished they would have blocked out those jockey shorts. I mean, that was borderline indecent. When Officer Wells cut off the tape, there was dead silence, except for some crying sounds. It wasn't from the twins. I could see them smiling up at me. Just as someone started to applaud, Officer Wells held up his hand. Hell of a thing to watch that tape. I shook that young man's hand last week in the hospital, and I'll shake it again before I leave today. Maybe you know him. Ethan Walker, a student here. Everyone looked up at me. I know I was beet red. There was the beginning of applause again, but Officer Wells held up his hand again, and it died down. But that's for later. You may think that Ethan has had enough heroics for a lifetime. In that clip, he suffered broken bones around his eye socket, a broken nose, a dislocated jaw, a broken arm, severely cracked ribs, and multiple stab wounds. But you saw it. He kept fighting until the moment I came in with my partner. Now watch this. The screen flashed again, and I immediately knew what was coming. It was the surveillance tape from the day in the meeting room when we showed the first tape. At least I had seen this scene all the way through before. As before, the lawyer stood up and demanded the tape be stopped. As before, he turned to his three clients and started to yell at them. As before, Ricky jumped up and started to come over the table at me. As before, I rose up and swung the butt stand right into Ricky's fat face. And my dad belted the one guy and threw him into the other guy. That got an ovation. Officer Wells ended by reminding the students, even the guys, to be aware of where they were going and what they might be getting themselves into. And you young ladies, he said, maybe you aren't lucky enough to have a brother like Ethan Walker to fight for you. So be careful. I took off out of the balcony, leaving my bewildered friends behind. I was thinking of just trying to sneak out the back and taking the rest of the day off. But that didn't happen. Instead, I got captured by a mob of kids, most of whom I barely knew by name, and was pushed and prodded to end up in the cafeteria. Geez, the poking and jostling hurt like hell. And Daniel Wells did track me down and shake my hand again. Well, that certainly changed the dynamics of my school life a little bit. It was an interesting lunch. I remember I ate something, but I couldn't tell you what. I never went through the food line. One of the cafeteria ladies just brought me a tray. Mostly, I remember saying, "You saw the tape. I have nothing to add," about 1,000 times. I was joined by my Ratfink sisters, who sat beaming on each side of me and held my arms with pride of possession. Lena held the left one very carefully. I was sure they were the ones who arranged for the showing. Them. And Dad. Traitors. I wasn't ashamed of anything I'd done. I just didn't want to be fawned over for it. I wasn't used to being the center of attention the way Lena and Natalie were. The rest of the day, I did go to classes, but I don't remember much of them. Maybe there was nothing taught. At first, everyone had questions that I couldn't or didn't want to answer. Where did I learn to fight? Did I really almost die? Did I think about it before I went into action? Or did it just come naturally? A couple of girls asked me if I always wore those to bed. I was never so happy to see a school day end. And if you think about that, you'll know how much I hated most everything that day. By the next day, things seemed to begin to get more back toward normal. Except for my social life. I now had a definite swarm of admirers. There were all these people who came to sit with me and the other misfits in the cafeteria. One day, one of my sister's circle, gorgeous, sexy Grace, came and sat down with my little group. She said she was so impressed by what I did. How brave I was. She asked if I was still hurting. I said yes, but that my friends and I were used to hurting at school. She frowned. At school? I took a deep breath, looked around at my friends, and laid into her. I told her we all hurt when she and her friends and the jocks went out of their way to embarrass us in the hallways with all their stunts and digs. That when we were all back in grade school, we all used to be able to talk together. Now, if one of us even tried to talk to the girls, they and their friends would shoot us down so hard that we wanted to crawl away. That there are all kinds of ways to hurt people. The injuries that had been done to me were healing, but some of the cruel things that the Golden Girls and the in-crowd did to us every day hurt almost as much as broken ribs. I said that the only reason she had even bothered to come talk to me was because she saw me on a videotape. Other than that, she would never have given me the time of day. I can tell you that Grace was shocked. Some of her friends had drifted over to hear what was going on, and they were affected too. Later, I learned that when Grace went home, she went to her mother and told her what had happened that day, that she had tried to talk to me, and what I had said. She asked her mother if she was really that big of a B*TCH. Her mother said that she already knew the answer. Like her, in her day, her mother had been a golden girl, and had treated the uncool kids like dirt. It was only later on that she had met and fallen in love with her husband, who had been one of the uncool kids in her classes. She had learned a lot from him about how she had been. She asked Grace to think about this. Who among the boys that she knew was someone who would risk his life for someone he loved? Would she find him on the football team? Or sitting with the social rejects? Oh, the football players were brave enough when all padded up and making a tackle on the field. But would they be brave enough to dare do what this Walker boy had done? If I were you, I'd cultivate that young man, she told her daughter. So Grace asked me to ask her out. I almost dropped my jaw when she did it, but I recovered and asked her out. I took her to dinner, her choice. We wound up at a little Italian restaurant in the next town. I thought it was pretty good, but we had as good closer in our own downtown. I had told her to dress up a little, and I took her dancing. It was mostly old couples. And she said she didn't know how to dance those old social dances. She'd never learned the waltz and the foxtrot and all those wonderful conventional dances. Mom had taught me, and the twins, so I showed her the steps. She was a cheerleader and a gymnast, and she had no trouble learning fast. She seemed to enjoy herself. I got very excited in the slow dances, and she noticed but didn't seem to mind. Afterwards, we went driving around. She wanted to go out of town, away from the usual parking spots. When we parked, things got very hot very fast. I got to play with her, and then she gave me my first BJ. I thought I should return the attention, so I tried my best to eat her out, based on some reading I had done. She seemed to like it a lot. Afterwards, she said she was surprised at my size. "I thought you were supposed to be a needle," she teased. "Don't believe everything you hear about me," I said. We went on several more dates, and I thought I was going to lose my virginity if we went out many more times. But something began to bother me. I realized that she never wanted to go to the popular places where the other kids went. She liked me, and she wanted to have sex with me, but she didn't want to be seen with me. That was hypocritical, I thought. I asked her about it, and she finally admitted I was right. She really liked me, but she just couldn't bear to lose her place among the golden girls by being seen with me. I was a hero, but I was still not one of the cool people. Reluctantly, I told her I didn't think we should date anymore if she was ashamed to be seen with me. I gave up the BJs and all that. She said she was sorry, that she really liked me, but she was afraid of losing her status. I told her I could understand that, and I did. I had seen it in my own family. We parted as friends, and she would talk to me in the halls. That was okay. Almost everyone would do that once the tape had been shown. It seemed to be a bridge between me and the cliques. And if they talked to me, they would talk to my friends too. My next girlfriend was Mandy. Not one of the in-crowd, but not one of the misfits either. And very happy to be seen with me. We necked, got to heavy petting, and she said that she was on the pill. That was my first time full-out sex. And it was good. As we went on dating, it got even better. But we gradually realized that we had nothing in common other than sex and my celebrity. We didn't share the same interests, or taste in movies, or music, or anything. We talked about it and finally decided that we should see other people. It was mutual. We parted on good terms. I dated a couple more girls during the end of my junior year and the first part of my senior year. But they were just casual. There was some sex. Mostly BJs and muff diving. Lots of girls were paranoid about getting pregnant in high school. But it was not earth-shaking. And with each girl, we gradually drifted apart and became friends. I'll say this. I never seemed to part on bad terms with any of my girlfriends. Even after my fame or notoriety or whatever had faded away, I found that there were many girls who liked me and were interested in going with me. But there was never anyone who was special. You know, someone who might be for more than casual dates and casual sex. Then, in February of my senior year, a new girl came into school as a transfer. Her name was Claire Donovan, and it turned out that she was Mrs. Hitchens' granddaughter. Something had happened to break up her family, and she made it clear to her splitting parents that she didn't want to live with either of them. She decided she wanted to live with her grandmother, who became her legal guardian. So in addition to seeing her around in school, I saw her almost every day after school at Mrs. Hitchens' house. She was a bit out of the ordinary. For one thing, she dressed differently from the trendsetters at school. The standard cool uniform was designer jeans or shorts. Claire liked to wear long dresses or skirts with tights or leggings, whatever she felt comfortable in. For another, she was oblivious to the social pecking orders. She spoke to anyone and everyone. If the people she approached tried to put her in her place, she just smiled and walked away, and left them alone. I first met her walking out of school one day. She just walked up to me and said, "Hi, I'm Claire. I already know who you are. You're Ethan Walker. The Golden Twins are your sisters." I nodded and made some small talk about the twins. It was just the most natural thing in the world to walk her home and through the gate and up to Mrs. Hitchens' porch. There sat Lily Hitchens with a plate of cookies and a pitcher of lemonade. Claire had been going to school in Virginia, and she was interested in comparing how things went in her new school versus the old one. She attracted me right away. She was pretty, although there were girls in school who were prettier. She was different in the way she looked at things, like the high school fads and customs. And she was direct. She told you up front how she felt about things. When she asked me to clue her in on the way things went at school, I told her as much as I could. It turned out that she was interested in knowing all of the social layers and cliques and all, but she just wasn't interested in joining in with any of them. "Look, Ethan," she said, "I'm only going to be here for 4+ months. So what's the point of trying to worm my way into this inner circle you talk about? I don't want to be a golden girl. I really like to dress as I please and not try to follow fashion trends. I like to talk to lots of people. Now, you seem to be a lot like me. I see you talking to the jocks, the techno geeks, the golden girls. You seem to be accepted by most of the groups, at least to talk to. Oh, well, I said. I had an unusual way to get to be friends with lots of kids. Just lucky. At heart, I'm a nerd. Claire tilted her head slightly, watching me. People don't seem to put labels like that on you. A lot of them seem to think you're something special. Especially the girls. You sure don't date like a nerd. And I've heard you referred to as a hero. I didn't want to seem like I was bragging about that old stuff. So I said, well, something happened a while back that made people notice me. I used that to bridge some social gaps. And my sisters helped me with that. They were very popular. And they brought me over into contact with their cool group friends. I was trying to avoid specifics. Claire smirked. Aha. That something that happened wouldn't happen to be a video, would it? What the hell? What's this about you being the star of that video? She laughed. I hear that you were almost naked. Was it an adult film? I looked at her closely and saw that she was teasing. I also saw that she had these lovely green eyes. Well, it certainly was not an adult film, I said indignantly. It was just a thing that happened at my house. And it's ancient news now. So I really don't want to get into it. Lily, who had joined us on the porch a while ago, laughed and patted my knee. Ethan is just being modest, Claire. He did a very courageous thing last year. Claire grinned. Yeah, I was just telling him that I've heard something about that. Someday, I'll have to figure out how to get a copy of that tape I keep hearing about. Then she and her grandmother laughed as if sharing a secret joke. I hoped that would never happen. I did not want Claire seeing my skinny body in those jockeys. It continued to be the most natural thing to walk Claire to and from school every day after that. Then there was a dance, and since she didn't have a steady, as far as I knew, I asked her to go with me. We danced, we talked, and we had a good time. Afterward, I took her out and we parked. We made out a little bit, but I didn't want to mess things up with Lily. This was her granddaughter, for heaven's sake. I ended up dating Claire pretty regularly, and we spent more time together, growing closer. We shared moments of intimacy, enjoying each other's company. But I hesitated to take things further. She had a beautiful, petite frame. Then one night, she suddenly grabbed my hand and placed it on her lap. Ethan, she said, I'm not inexperienced, you know? I know you've been in relationships before. What's holding you back? I tried to explain my concerns about how Lily might feel, but she stopped me with a passionate kiss. When we came up for air, she said, Oh, don't worry about Granny, Ethan. She thinks you walk on water and can do no wrong. I think she'd like you as a grandson-in-law. I jerked upright. What? She laughed. Oh, don't be so surprised, Ethan. I know that you're beginning to fall in love with me. Right now. Do you want to have sex with me? Or do you want to make love to me? She held my gaze. You know the difference, don't you? I can get down with either one. Fact is, I've been halfway in love with you since before I ever met you. Now I'm all the way in. No, why? Surprise. It's not that you're a hero. I was just kidding with you, pretending I didn't know all about it. Granny has it on a DVD. I've watched you fight to protect your sisters 100 times. And it thrills and frightens me every single time I watch. So the hero thing is a wonderful bonus for someone like me who already loves you. You are a brave, noble man, a protector. And it's not just that. You come very highly recommended as a lover, although that's a definite plus. I blinked. Oh yes, she continued. I've heard the girls talk about you. Your former girlfriends are very complimentary. I opened my mouth to say something, but she placed a finger over my lips. But I didn't start to fall for you for those things. I didn't know about them a year ago. No, I began to get interested in this very nice stranger named Ethan who came a mile on hot days, dragging a lawnmower and mowed my grandma's lawn. I wanted to know more about this nice young man named Ethan who came over after it snowed and shoveled her sidewalks for her. I would ask her about you. Is he really as nice as he seems? What else did he do for her? When I began to fall in love, it was with a guy named Ethan who walked all over the neighborhood in a rainstorm to find and bring back my granny's little dog. I absolutely fell in love with a man named Ethan who came down on icy roads in his dad's truck when he thought her power might be out, and took a cold, frightened old woman and her old dog back to the safety and warmth of his home. I fell in love with your kindness and generosity long before I ever heard about that night you defended Lena and Natalie with your life, Ethan. And after I saw that video, I was completely gone. You are a wonderful, caring man, and I'm hopelessly in love with you. So, if you want sex, I'm yours. If you want to make love, I'm yours for that too. But what I really want to hear is you admitting that you love me too. Because you do. That actually wasn't very hard. I wasn't saying it to get into her pants, because she'd already told me she was mine for that. I just looked into my heart, and it was right there. Now, we're both graduating. We are both going to the same college, which is in Westport City, across the state. They have an urban campus with very little dorm space, so even freshmen can live off campus, as long as they have parental permission. We will live together off campus and come home on weekends. I have a specific career goal, and the school has a very good computer program. Claire is more interested in a general education with an emphasis on English and literature. She can do that at the same college quite well. We will have to survive 4 years of exposure to new ideas, new things, and new people. There's some room for worry whether we can survive as a couple that long. But Claire is supremely unconcerned. Sometimes I am too. And so our story begins. Thanks for watching. If you were in Ethan's shoes, would you risk everything to protect your family? Let us know in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe for more stories. See you next time.